All right, welcome everyone to another LDI live stream. Today we're discussing the fascinating world of lucid dreaming and how critical thinking plays a crucial role in mastering this skill. My name is Jesse, also known as Night Owl. Here with me
And
today, I have
yep.
Skyfall, Blind Dreamer.
Mhm.
I'll allow him to introduce himself.
I'm Ryan, also known as Skyfall Blind Dreamer, and we're going to be talking about critical awareness, which is sort of like combining critical thinking and critical examination with being aware of an experience that you're having in the present moment. And it's really both those things that come together to form you know, a pretty important kind of aspect to lucidity, because ultimately that is what lucidity is. It's being aware of what you're experiencing, while you're experiencing it. That is what lucidity is. In when applied to dreaming, you're aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming, and being critical of what you're experiencing, examining it and looking for potential dream signs, which we'll get to, is a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. Lucid dreaming allows us to become aware and even sometimes control our dreams. It's not just a fantastical experience, but also a practice that benefits greatly from clear thinking and mindfulness. So, with that being said, let's sort of define critical thinking as it applies to lucid dreaming. Um, for me, it involves being able to question the reality you're in, whether it be in waking life or in the dream world, to analyze certain elements of your environment and to make decisions consciously within that state, whether you're awake or asleep. Ryan, what do you think of that?
So critical thinking comes down to being able to think about your thinking, examine it from almost like a meta perspective. Instead of just taking it for granted, actually examine what your thinking is like, understand why you're thinking a certain way. And when you apply this to lucid dreaming, you get into the awareness aspect. It's being aware of what you're experiencing in the moment while you're experiencing it, and critically examining it, not taking what you're experiencing for granted, looking for potential dream signs for any cues that you might be in a dream. And there are various ways you can do that. And so that's like the bridge between critical thinking, and then you apply that to critical awareness.
Yeah, that's great. Thinking about thinking. How meta is that? And welcome in everyone. It looks like we have a few viewers. I see DD and Supernova in the chat. Welcome. Um, yeah, so just to apply it to lucid dreaming, some things you can do with critical thinking. You can recognize dream signs, question unusual occurrences, and maintain lucidity to continue exploring that dream scenario. So maybe Ryan, you can tell them a little bit more about how you define dream signs, because I know your perspective on this is a little different than what I've heard from
Yes,
others.
my perspective, I like to say it's a little bit more nuanced, because dream signs is a term that people will throw around and will often define in a way and then assume everyone else defines it the same way. So let's define our terms. I consider a dream sign to be anything that's out of place in any way, something it has a low chance of happening while awake, or something that has a high chance of happening in your dreams. And that doesn't mean my dreams; it means your dreams, because there's can be things that occur frequency in your dreams that may not occur in somebody else's dreams, but that can be dream signs for you. This is very individualistic, very subjective. There's also recurring dream signs. So those are things that are dream signs that crop up, but that are kind of repeated. You get into the realm of themes and patterns, things that repeat themselves or that replicated in your dreams. One of mine, for example, is travel. I love to travel, and in my dreams, I'm often traveling in some way. There's a lot of things that are travel themed that end up in my dreams that be considered a recurring dream sign. Um, you know, there are things related to certain games that I've played that also can be recurring dream signs in a way, depending on the situation. And so ultimately, a dream sign is something that can indicate that you are dreaming, that this is not all that it appears to be, that something is rotten in Denmark, or maybe not so rotten, but you get the idea, that this is not what it appears to be. You're actually in a dream right now. Well, I hope you're not, because then you wouldn't be listening to this live stream. But suppose you were in a dream right now. How would you know? And recognizing indications and clues that you're dreaming is a big part of critical awareness. I'll let you go for a second, but then I want to get into like an example of how you can actually do this. So,
Yeah, I think that's great. And just to add to what you're
mm,
Reality checks.
ouch, ouch! You just buzzed really bad.
Oh, I'm
Can
so
you repeat yourself, please? You had a big buzz moment in there.
maybe we are dreaming after all. But yeah, I was just gonna say critical state tests or reality checks are a great way to confirm, um, especially when you suspect that it could possibly be a dream. Yeah, Supernova said buzz.
Yep.
Sorry, um, but yeah, and this is why Skyfall specifically doesn't rely on critical state tests, because if you're questioning your lucidity in the moment, then it could be potentially holding you back. But it's great to confirm suspicions, especially if you recognize a recurring dream theme or some peculiarity in waking life that might seem like a dream sign. Then maybe just pause to reflect on your consciousness. Ask yourself, where was I just at? What was I doing? Does this make sense? And that's hello, rare Helge. He said hi or near or not. But yeah, that's sort of how critical state tests and reality checks fit themselves into this critical awareness we're talking about. And I like to talk specifically about critical thinking because I think that's a waking life skill that we all can develop that's conducive to lucidity. So, with that being said, maybe we can get into some applications for critical
Oh
awareness.
yes, absolutely.
I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, because one thing I will say is that the critical state test or reality check, as people call them, but that I call them state tests. But the way those are just one piece of the puzzle. They're one way to do critical awareness, and usually when you're doing a state test, if you're doing it properly, it's the last thing you do, not the first thing you do. And physical tests in particular, one of the issues with some of them is that most rely on dream control, things like finger through palm and stuff like that, that just that they can easily fail when dream control fails because if you're actually doubting yourself, that's a dream control failure typically. So things that work only on dream control typically aren't the best way to go about it, and they should never be mindless if you're doing a state test. And let's get into what that looks like to actually do a mindful critical state test, but doing the whole process properly. And I'm going to do it with the experience that I'm having right now because basically the way you do this, one of the best ways is to examine your experience and look for any indications that are out of place, acknowledge what you're actually experiencing, and think about that. Actually question, could I be dreaming? The answer is you always could be. And you can confirm that you're dreaming, but my idea is like you can't necessarily confirm that you're awake because you could always end up with a state test failure that dream control related. So I could say the best thing you could do is confirm that you're dreaming and then suspect that you're awake. But let's get into it. So right now I'm sitting in a chair. I'm talking to you guys on my live stream. I can hear myself talking. I can sense the light coming through the window. I can feel my hands that are really cold in my lap, and everything around me, the table, the chair, the room itself. I can hear sounds coming from other rooms. And so let's think about this. Is there anything in my environment that is out of place right now? Well, I don't, sometimes in dreams, I might see a little bit more than I do awake. I'm not experiencing that right now. Um, my computer is working just fine, but it also does in dreams for the most part, except there are no inconsistencies that I've been observing. I haven't really observed any inconsistencies in that. Um, I'm not hearing anything, any sudden changes, any time skips, any location changes. Thinking back through my recent memories, I've been sitting in this chair for probably, let's see, an hour and 20 minutes or so. I've been sitting in this chair. No time skips, not a lot of jumping from place to place. Going through memory since I last thought I woke up. This is another part of this. So I got up out of bed and I sat in bed for a bit and was listening to stuff on my phone. And then I got up and took a shower and used the restroom, had music playing on my Alexa device. Oh, sorry if I triggered that for anybody. Came back, got dressed, took my sheets off, went downstairs, got lunch, talked to dad about the golf tournament, somebody hitting a hole in one on the ninth hole to just make the cut for the US Open, which is a thing that actually happened. Came back to my room and basically I've been at my computer doing stuff on my computer for the last hour and a half. Now, you could create false memories in here potentially. You could have a false awakening that appears pretty normal, but are there any time skips? Are there any jumps in here? Anything? So any like big dream signs for me? Anything travel related? No, there hasn't been. No massive jumps that I can think of. going through my memory, nothing that seems to be out of place. And the last thing you would do when you go through that process, actually think about that, because you could notice something. Hey, for example, say I'm taking a flight. Hey, I'm actually flying right now. Say I was on a plane like I was last month in May. Traveling's a dream sign of mine. That's something that comes up. So if I'm actually flying right now, I could potentially be dreaming and should be paying more attention to what I'm experiencing. Well, should always be paying attention. And then also emotions, because emotions in dreams may not be exactly what you're used to in waking life. In dreams, sometimes I'm go off the handle in dreams that I just in a way that I just don't in waking life. Um, More of a roller coaster, much less kind of regulated or controlled. And I haven't noticed any of that since I last thought I woke up either. So I think that I'm awake. Now, I can't 100% say that I'm awake, but I think that I am. And like the last thing you can do to try to test whether or not you're awake is the state test, is the critical state test. Now you've gone through your memories, you've retraced what you thought you've done since you last woke up, you've examined your environment. Now you can do a critical state test. And there are a couple that are recommended if you're doing physical tests. We've gone through the non-physical right now, being aware aspect. And if you're doing a physical test, there's like the nose pinch and breathing one where you hold your nose closed, you try to breathe, and the rereading one. Now, keep in mind, in the rereading one, you read text or you look at something complex and you look away, you keep looking back, and you try to make it change, because things that don't have a stable external reference in dreams that are pretty complex can be inconsistent. Now, keep in mind though, any state test can fail. So if you're going to use one, do it multiple times or use a couple of them, and they're not like 100% reliable. Nothing is foolproof. So all that being said, you should be in a mindset, if you go through this process, of critically examining and thinking about not just brushing things off, but actually thinking about what you're doing. And then I would challenge you to remain aware of your experience for a bit, like say for a couple minutes, do like a SAT, like a sporadic awareness technique kind of practice. Remain aware of what you're doing and thinking about it, looking for dream signs for a few minutes, just as you're doing an activity, like as I'm talking on this live stream, just being aware of the experience that I'm having and paying some attention to that while I'm talking to you guys. And there's an example of how you can actually do this. You there?
Yeah, yeah, we're here. I was actually just doing it as you were talking. But I love that you say not to trust your state test, not to rely on one and just to go back to what you're doing, to try it a few times, or to try a couple of different ones, and to really imagine what it would be like if it were to change, if something were to go awry and indicate, well, maybe I could be dreaming. And that's actually the advice that I like to give people, that I don't hear a lot with reality checks. And that's to not just to assume you're awake and to do it, you know, um, passively without really thinking about it too much, to actually imagine, to use your imagination and to wonder, what would this be like if I were dreaming? What were to happen if I tried to push my finger through my palm? Really
Not that
felt,
idea.
my skin stretching, or what were to happen if I look at this text, look away, and look back? What might it say the next time? And to really just stretch your imagination. That's how I like to do state tests, and I also feel like it's conducive to control, because the more you practice that active imagination, the more likely those things are to manifest through intention within a dream.
So yeah, good example of inconsistencies in text. I do this in Braille in dreams. And just last night I had a dream. I was in an elevator in a hotel somewhere. So again, travel themed. And there was a button for the 82nd floor right next to one for the 26th floor. And that makes a whole lot of sense. Absolutely makes a lot of sense. But one thing I would say is a mindless state test, one that's done without really thinking about it, one that's not really critical, one that's just going through the motions of a physical test and just doing it like that, like just in one moment and mindlessly doing it, is about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Don't do that. That's not helpful. And aside from the finger through palm just not being a reliable state test, not going to go there. But I did. But but the thing is though, again, going to what you just said, Night Owl, because that's actually a really important thing I meant to bring up. But once you've done a state test, even when you think you're awake, again, you can't 100% say, but when you think you're awake, consider what if I was dreaming, and almost do like a little bit of a mild exercise where you rescript a moment and you try to imagine what you would do. So consider like, what if I was dreaming? What would I do? And imagine what you would do if you had actually gotten lucid and you did recognize that you were in a dream in that moment, what you would do. And that's almost like a daytime mild exercise that you can do as part of state testing. So that is something to think about as well.
That's great. And I love your mention of mild. For people who aren't familiar, it's where Skyfall defines it as rescripting a dream, right? So think of a
Actually,
recent dream you've
to
had.
be fair, it's not me who defines it that way. Actually, I use Dr. Kristen Lamarca's mild interpretation is the one that I subscribe to. So to be
Perfect.
fair, let's actually credit our sources here. I actually subscribe to Dr. Kristen Lamarca's interpretations of mild. I really like how she approaches it and her modern interpretations of it.
That's great. So I encourage people to look into that. But just to summarize, basically, you familiarize yourself with a recent dream. It doesn't have to be a recent dream, but those work best. And then to imagine a point of awareness where you should have recognized a dream sign, and then to sort of rescript that scenario
Mhm.
um, through visualization to imagine what would it be like if this were to happen instead. And that's
Mhm.
also going to lend itself to like a dream exit induced lucid dream where you can wake up from a dream, rescript it, go back in and become lucid. But we're not going to get into that too
Yeah,
much, and
that's
just
that's
because you
getting into
mentioned it.
the wake initiated
Um,
territory, and that is a
yeah.
little different. But yeah,
So,
that.
really quickly, we're talking about applying critical thinking techniques. For those of you who joined us, welcome
Mhm.
in. And we talked about critical state tests or reality checks and how that goes hand in hand with critical awareness, right? But there's a few other things I want to talk about as it pertains to critical thinking itself. And this is where I wanted to give just a little bit of history, right? Blind Psychonaut, hello and welcome. Um, so, one thing I think is worth mentioning is a famous philosopher named Socrates, who
Mhm.
sort of helped us imagine critical thinking in the modern world even today. And he was around, I believe it was like 400 BCE. And he didn't really even write anything down, which is amazing because he's almost known for having these lengthy conversations. I won't even call it debates. They're more like discussions, right? Like what happens with me and Skyfall a lot, and basically asking meaningful questions. And I'm just really simplifying here, but to break it down, the Socratic method itself is how you can sort of gain information from someone and almost break down any thought process in logical terms. And I really like this action oriented summary I've heard from somebody named Simon Ash on YouTube. And I'm a big fan of alliteration. So this really stuck with me. And the first step of the Socratic method is to receive. You sort of take in what somebody's telling you, right? Just like I'm doing now. Just think for a moment whether or not you agree with what I'm saying. And then you want to reflect it back to that person. So this is a great time to like paraphrase or did I understand you correctly? Um, so receive and then reflect. And then you want to restate. So that's where you can sort of start to break down what somebody's saying and interject with argument almost. And this is where you start to poke holes in somebody's understanding of what they're actually saying. And then you want to refine it so that you're taking what was said, you're taking what you said when you reflected and restated it, and now you're going to refine it so that you come to this sort of mutual understanding, and you can repeat that process as much as you'd like to get to the core of anything. And now, to simplify this again, I've got a 2-year-old, and she's getting to the age where she asks, "What is that?" or "Why?" And you, if you know toddlers, you can ask why infinitely many times and never really get to an answer, right? It's like, why are we on the live stream? Well, we wanted to talk about critical thinking. Well, why did you want to talk about critical thinking? Well, we thought it was important for any lucid dreaming practice. Well, why is it important to a lucid dreaming practice? Because you need to maintain this state of mindfulness. Well, why is mindfulness? And it goes on and on and on.
Mhm.
But really, to reference what Skyfall said earlier, it's so meta. You want to think about thinking and not assume or jump to conclusions. So often when we're having these discussions, um, we devolve into just waiting for our chance to speak, right? Instead of really absorbing what we're hearing, processing it internally, not just confirming our bias, which is, this fallacy we all have as human beings, but you want to sort of stretch your brain a little bit and start to wonder, what if? And that's sort of the essence of Socratic reasoning as I understand it. But some more fun facts about this guy. Since he didn't really write anything down, I thought I'd mention one of his students.
Plato, the Republic.
Plato, yes, thank you. So if you know about Plato and the allegory of the cave.
I've read Allegory of the Cave and the Apology, actually. I had to read that a few years ago.
Great. And so very well read in philosophy. I love to hear that. But yeah, so that's just a quick reference point. And then it also made me think of another famous philosopher, Rene Descartes, who sort of said, "It is what it is." That's my favorite phrase.
I like cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am. Perfect. And I actually want to argue that it also is what it is not, right? So we might not ever truly understand everything that we don't know or couldn't possibly know, but through process of elimination, we can sort of get close. And that's the way a lot of empirical science works nowadays. And I thought I would do this fun little exercise with you, Skyfall, while you're here, and anybody who's in the audience can play along with this as well. I want you to guess what's in my hand.
Well, first off, welcome Blind Psychonautic, because I actually do know him from Reddit and outside of social media. Welcome. I hope you're doing all right. And let's see, what's in your hand? I would guess probably your phone or your keyboard.
That's a great guess. Now, why did you jump to that conclusion?
You're on a live stream. You've told me already that you're on your computer. And so if you're on your computer, and you're holding something and it's anything related to do with the live stream in the moment, which it doesn't have to be, but it could, the most logical objects would be either your keyboard or your mouse, which I should have mentioned as well, because I don't use one, and your phone, potentially, if you're checking anything or doing anything on that.
Somebody said a cube, your Moldavite crystal, great guess. A keychain, I love it. Everybody's dropping their guesses in the chat. I'll give you some context, Skyfall. I'm able to clasp both my hands around this object without revealing what it is.
A ring.
That's another great guess. No, it's actually an elephant.
A statue. Or a stuffed animal.
Exactly. It's a little wooden statue, a carving of an elephant. Right. And now, critically, if I were to tell somebody I was holding an elephant, right, you're immediately going to rationalize that to say, well, clearly this is not a living elephant. This is not, an actual animal. This has to be some representation, right? And now we get into the abstract a little bit. Now that I've got you primed a little bit, right? Just humor me for one more moment here. If I were to say I have the world in my hands, how would you take that?
Literally, a globe. Physically, you're one of the most powerful people on the planet. Or not physically, literally the globe, but figuratively, you're one of the most powerful people on the planet.
You nailed it. Yep. First guess, you got the globe. And now, that's just a quick example of how priming can lead you to rationalizing conclusions. And it makes sense, right? Because it provides more context. And, as human beings, we're great at making associations so that you immediately thought, well, I'm not speaking metaphorically because this is an exercise I'm doing. He must actually be holding something. So whereas normally you might hear somebody who says they have the whole world in their hands and think of how powerful or opportunistic they are, you immediately put two and two together.
There's a spiritual song, about God having the whole world in his hands. Yeah, there's actually.
Yeah.
But also, let's take I want to take a little bit of a sharp turn down an unlabeled service road for a second. But let's take rationalization to the other side for a minute. So say you're actually dreaming, because there's a line between rationalizing in this sense, like what we're talking about, of critically examining the circumstances and applying logic, and then there's dream logic. And dreams have a way of rationalizing anything. And so you could see somebody literally holding a planet in a dream, and you could find a way to rationalize that. So you also have to be careful not to go that way either and blindly accept any conclusion you come to.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's really what we're talking about here. Don't believe anything just because we say it. Really question and challenge your beliefs. Now, what if I were to tell you that that elephant I was holding in my hands, it was actually just my earbud case. It wasn't an elephant at all, but because I told you it was, that's what you saw and you believed it. Now, I hope I'm getting you to think just a little bit. Blind Psychonaut says elephant. That's what I meant to say, and they may very well be psychic. So props to them.
Well,
They're,
he's
they're
also
the one
blind
who
on
got it
one.
correct,
His,
and that's amazing. But yeah, let's keep talking about this a little bit. So we're talking about application for critical thinking, right? And now we've discussed how you can use reality checks. We've talked about the Socratic method of continuing to ask questions. And now I think it might be worth mentioning mindfulness as well, because mindfulness also plays a crucial role in this. By staying present and aware in dreams or in waking life, you can maintain lucidity and prevent yourself from slipping back into unconsciousness. And so, again, we're creatures of habit, and we work, on a daily basis through routines. And this is where criticality goes to die, right?
yes.
So the subconscious exists for a reason, guys. I mean, it's so powerful that we can process all this information, and we don't have to think about regulating our breath or our blood pressure or the temperature or our nervous system, any of that stuff, so that we can consciously focus on things like, the words I'm saying, hopefully. But really, mindfulness is about single-minded attention. It's about letting thoughts come and go, but staying focused. And that's why breath is my favorite mindfulness practice, because it's something we all do all the time. If you're not, you wouldn't be listening to this right now. But you're probably not aware of it, right? So shifting your awareness back to your breath can help you realize and reflect even where your consciousness is at. Are you stressed? Are you calm? Are you relaxed? And then a funny thing happens. If you start to breathe in certain ways, you can actually shift the way you feel. It's amazing. So did you have anything to add about mindfulness,
Well,
Skyfall?
right now I'm slightly excited because I've been enjoying this live stream, and I've also contemplating at the same time. I've been contemplating about 3 or 4 different things, including mindless habits, habitual state testing that people do, trying to make it a habit, how that often can lead to autopilot mindlessness. All that came up within the last about 45 seconds. And I've just been excited doing this live stream, thinking about the last things that we were just talking about, and listening to you all at the same time.
Yeah, and I would say you're a very mindful person, right? You're
Sometimes.
you're aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
You're present, and that's what makes you such a great host for these live streams, right? You're living in the moment, and you're able to share that energy with people. But mindfulness is a skill that everyone can cultivate, and meditation is a great way to do it, sure. But if you're not comfortable with just sitting down and thinking about nothing, or focusing on your breath for a few minutes, even just 5 minutes a day can make a difference. Then there's plenty of other mindfulness exercises you can do. When I attended this Universal Unitarian Methodist building, it's basically a different religion for every day of the week. I attended some Buddhist sessions where they were teaching meditation, and I was amazed to find out that walking meditation exists. Literally, you don't just have to be seated in a yoga pose to do it. You can walk and be aware of your feet touching the ground, the sensation of your leg lifting and your foot making contact, the different texture of the place you're walking, the sounds of your environment. Just really being present is what it's all about. You can do it on a walk without really focusing on your footsteps. You could just be aware of where you're at and take in your surroundings. These sort of practices can help you become more aware of your environment in the dream as well. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for mindfulness. It not only can help you become lucid, sure, but there's plenty of other benefits, like just making you a more peaceful person, for example.
Yeah. I think for a minute, why don't we address some of the opposite side of the coin, the what not to do when you're doing state tests. And that is to take the critical out of critical state tests. That is to do them mindlessly. You'll see a lot of people on YouTube or other places say, well, what you want to do is you want to reality check 500 million times a day until it becomes this habit and you're just automatically doing it. And then you'll do it in your dreams and then you'll get lucid, because everyone knows that the key to being lucid is being 100% mindless on autopilot and doing something so many times that you absolutely ignore it and you don't even pay attention. That is the key to lucidity. So if you couldn't tell by the sarcasm there, that's actually not the case.
Yeah.
And basically, the biggest problem is most habits are mindless habits. There are some habits that can be mindful, but most habits are mindless habits. Most habits are habits for a reason. We do them without thinking about them. And that is the exact opposite of what you want with state testing or with critical awareness in general. You want quality over quantity. You don't want to spam something a lot, because the more we do something, the less we pay attention to it. The more repetitive it is, the less we care. So you don't want to cheat critical awareness that way at all.
Yeah, that's great. If you could see me, Ryan, I was just thunder tapping my hand, trying to push my finger through my palm 500 times. I couldn't even get to 100. Um, um, yeah, so you definitely don't want to just assume. And then there is something such as attention blindness. So we do a really good job of becoming less aware to stimulus over time. And perhaps this is why everybody gets into car accidents within, 5 minutes of their house, because of complacency, right? So think about that for a second. Why might that be? And it's because you're so close to home, you sort of just go on autopilot. And that's the opposite of what we want to do with critical state tests. And there's also these limiting beliefs I wanted to talk about. So many beginners face doubts about their ability to lucid dream. And critical thinking really helps challenge those limiting beliefs, replacing them with confidence and persistence. Again, go back to that wonderful imagination. What if I were dreaming right now? What would you do? Think about it for a second. And then I also wanted to talk about navigating misinformation, because, um, thoughts can be deceiving. Sometimes dreams can present confusing or misleading scenarios, and that executive function, which allows us to really process normal everyday things and come to conclusions, is sort of inactive in that state, and you're not able to logically rationalize what's happening or why it doesn't make sense. Critical thinking helps discern between dream elements that align with reality and those that don't. And those are the dream signs that Ryan mentioned before. But misinformation on a larger scale is something we all deal with in this digital age of social media. And we all should become better critical thinkers to wonder, is that real or not?
Yeah.
Right? There's such things as deep fakes. There's, these sources, and, these social media influencers, for example. I guess you could consider us one of them. Like, who are we to say
Yeah.
what criticality is and what it isn't? And you really should do your research and discover for yourself if that's something that you believe.
Absolutely. And the
And
next time someone tells you that lucid dreaming is about controlling your dreams, seriously question that.
yeah, you want to
But yeah.
question
Yeah.
your sources for sure.
Mhm.
The other day I got into a debate with somebody about what is your favorite lucid dreaming technique? And they mentioned mild, they mentioned wild, and then they threw in dialed, DILD. And
I
I
see
had
that a
to
lot.
ask
People,
them,
what a lot of
how do you,
people will do is they'll claim that they'll take that term, which is not really a technique, and they'll apply it to reality checks. Actually, a lot of people do that.
and this is somebody who really advocates for reality checks, so you're spot on with that. But again, it just makes you wonder, don't just take it for what it is. Oh, that's another acronym, it must be a technique. Really ask, how do you practice that? And it might be worth defining the language differently. um, so yeah, those are some things you definitely want to look out for. Don't just assume, right? If it's a celebrity advocating for a product, realize that they're probably getting paid to promote this. They're just not, an avid customer of this brand. So really just be aware of the extent we're influenced in waking life and in dreams by making those sort of assumptions. And this is sort of like the bright side of criticality. I want to get through this now that we're about half hour in. I want to talk about creativity, right? So earlier we talked about how to properly do a critical state test or a reality check, and how to be creative about your expectations, not just to go through the motions mindlessly, but to be more mindful, to pause and reflect what if. And creativity is essential for shaping dream experiences. Critical thinking allows you to creatively manipulate dream elements and explore all of the possibilities of whatever you can imagine. And that's where drawing inspiration from dreams really comes in. So lucid dreams themselves can often spark creative ideas or solutions to waking life challenges. Just last night, I had a dream about putting diesel fuel into my car. And I thought, well, maybe it's time for an oil change. So, draw inspiration. Maybe those two things aren't, one-to-one, but again, think about, well, I'm worried about car trouble. So what can I actually do with agency to change that feeling, to make sure that, my dreams are inspiring a life of imagination? Critical thinking really helps you analyze and integrate these insights effectively.
Absolutely, it does. It is an important thing to do, and this doesn't just apply to lucid dreaming. It applies to life in general. In fact, if you're critically examining and thinking and questioning things and being more aware of what you see, it just helps you with life in general, like with products and things that Nina was just talking about, and with waking life experiences. Not to take everything you see at face value, but to actually examine it and to understand it, and to take a step back and then consider whether or not you actually agree with that. That's just an important life skill, and it just happens to apply really well to lucid dreaming. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I encourage everybody to go for a walk, to explore their immediate surroundings with fresh eyes, right? Even if it's just, your home, exploring your own house, and noticing something you might have neglected to pay attention to for quite some time, and really imagining the potential. Like, why is this thing there? How can, I experience it differently now that I'm trying on my critical thinking hat? And I just wanted to mention before we wrap up here, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? So knowledge, you can acquire a lot of facts, but through wisdom, you know how to make connections and apply the information you are aware of to create a change or to accomplish something. Wisdom in the context of lucid dreaming involves using knowledge gained from practice and experience to navigate dreams wisely, right?
Yeah.
So critical thinking ensures that decisions made in dreams align with personal growth and exploration. That's how I use my practice. And so somebody in the chat said, I'm not fully sure what state testing is. Sorry if I said that wrong.
Okay, so
go ahead, Ron. You take it.
State testing is basically it's part of critical awareness. It's where you're actively attempting to create a situation where you would potentially notice a dream sign. Instead of actually examining your environment looking for one, you're actively trying to create one. And so what you're doing is you're critically examining your environment, critically questioning and thinking about whether or not you're actually dreaming, and then taking some sort of action to try to demonstrate whether or not you are dreaming, and applying, critically examining the results of that response. You're trying to create a dream sign, basically. It's like the last step in critical awareness. It's like when you've done everything else and you haven't come to a conclusion, that's the last thing you do is a state test.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it, Skyfall. State testing is what I consider to be a supplement to a lucid dreaming practice.
Same.
Along with dream recall and critical thinking or mindfulness. These are all different skills that each deserve their own attention. Dee earlier in the chat said that they've been, thinking more critically in their waking life, but their recall has suffered. And I want to remind everyone not to be discouraged if certain elements are lacking, because each of these things should be focused on and mastered in and of themselves. And so it's normal for dream recall to fluctuate. Critical thinking works the same way, right? There's moments in your everyday life, like when you wake up in the morning, for example, you may feel more tired and less aware of your surroundings. And then perhaps after afternoon after you've had lunch and you've been moving for quite some time, you're at peak performance. It really depends on a lot of individual variables like your circadian rhythm and what type of chronotype you are, for example.
How much
So that's
sleep did you get? Were you up for 30 hours the day
yeah.
before? Were you like there's
Are
so
you
many different
hydrated,
variables.
right?
Yeah. Some of the
All these,
variables are not even in necessarily under your control. Like maybe in that moment you may not be aware of everything. But yeah, I think the bottom line is with anything that's dreaming related, a lot of these things can fluctuate. It's not an exact science. Like if you follow these exact steps, you're going to get lucid. That's not how it works. This is a way to build up skills, and you can have a bad day. You can have days where things are fluctuating, going up and down. Don't beat yourself up. It may not even be your fault. In fact, it probably isn't your fault if you're actually, following steps and doing things properly. Don't stress over it. Stress is a real killer, and understand that these things do fluctuate. It's normal and it's to be expected, and to be understood that that's not necessarily a problem with you. It's just that these things do fluctuate. And yeah.
yeah, and you can't do everything all at once. So take it one step at a time. Each day is a new opportunity to practice all these skills that we talk about. And hopefully you can see that here at LDI, we believe every individual has their own personal approach to a practice that can work for them. So all we can do is share our experiences and base our information on the existing evidence and do our best to cite those sources so that you can do your own research to determine what works best for you.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in that mild guide from Dr. Kristen Lamarck I was talking about earlier, you can find that at mindfulluciddreaming.com. That's her website, and you can find that link there.
Awesome, awesome. And anybody else who's wondering more information on state testing or critical state testing, we actually did have a debate you can find on this YouTube channel under the live video category, I believe. We did discuss some terminology and the different approaches to this. And as far as dream recall is concerned, we actually just did our first how-to video in this series on that specifically. So do go back and check out some of our older videos, because as we continue to expand, we're going to be referencing that content a lot. And again, each category sort of deserves its own time. So yeah, I mean, I encourage every one of you to apply these critical thinking principles to your own lucid living practice. Stay curious, stay mindful, and embrace the infinite possibilities that lucidity offers. I thank everybody for joining us for this discussion today.
Can
Hope
I
you all
close
keep
this out?
exploring. Yep, keep dreaming, and
Can
I'll
I
let
close this
Ryan.
out? All right. This live stream, thank you everybody for showing up today. Really appreciate it, guys. This stream was brought to you by the Lucid Dream Initiative. If you'd like to know more and possibly subscribe to our newsletter, please visit us at ldinitiative.org. That is ldinitiative.org. Thank you. And good lucid dreams.